So I've been a software engineer for over 3 years now, really 3 going on 4. And a few months back, I wrote a blog post detailing my top 5 pieces of advice after my first 3 years as a software engineer. Even though I haven't been doing this for too terribly long, my career has already had a lot of ups and downs, and I feel that I've learned a lot, so I hope you find this helpful. So the first piece of advice is lean into discomfort. So coding is uncomfortable, learning to code is uncomfortable, having a job in which you are expected to perform and produce code and meet deadlines and meet sprint commitments is uncomfortable. And there are just a lot of pretty uncomfortable aspects to this, and I'm sure many other jobs. But I think we kind of have this image of being a software engineer and kind of, getting free lunch and working in a sleek office and all this other kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, you're being paid to perform and produce great work, and it's always changing. There's always more stuff to learn, and so there are just a lot of things about it that are very, very challenging. It's also really tempting to just want to stick to what you know and to get good at one thing and kind of have everything be predictable, but I found that that kind of leads to stagnation and a lack of growth and a lack of learning. The times that I've grown the most, the times that I've learned the most, the times that I've been really impressed with how much is possible in this field are the times that I've also been the most uncomfortable. I think that's where a lot of the important growth happens. One example of this is at my current job. I was hired onto a React and Redux project, and I never had done Redux and was very nervous about that because I'd kind of made it into this big thing in my head. More on that later. And it was very stressful. I was the only front-end developer. I felt an immense amount of pressure, but I learned a ton during this project and learned that I could really count on myself to figure stuff out. And so that's just a small example of how much good comes out of being uncomfortable. So that's the first piece of advice, lean into discomfort. My second piece of advice is don't pigeonhole yourself. So I've had some jobs where my official title was kind of maybe front-end developer or something, but I've wanted to be a little bit more full stack. And so I just have kind of realized that I don't need anyone's permission in order to do a certain kind of engineering, and that a lot of these things kind of come down to whether you think you can do them and come down to semantics. I had a boss tell me, hey, if you want to be full stack, just start calling yourself a full stack developer. And I think the nugget of wisdom there is that a lot of stuff just comes down to kind of the identity you give yourself and what you believe you can do. And so I think this is really important. Like I said before, tech is changing so fast and so much. I think it's just important to kind of specialize and be really good, maybe in one or a few areas, but also to keep your options open. So don't pigeonhole yourself. My third piece of advice is to change jobs if need be. So my first job wasn't ideal. I was very thankful for it and still am grateful to have had the opportunity at the time, but it wasn't ideal. A lot of first jobs are not ideal, but I think maybe less so millennials, but we kind of get caught up thinking that we need to stay a certain amount of time or something like that. And I ended up leaving this job after 10 months, and it ended up being a really good move for me because I moved into more agency type work, which I'm still doing, and kind of the kind of work that I wanted to be doing. This job was in municipal government, and a lot of it was just kind of spent maintaining old legacy technologies and not getting to do a lot of cutting edge stuff, not necessarily writing a lot of code all the time either. And so I kind of saw the writing on the wall, saw that I was being incentivized to stay for years and years as the benefits, continued to get good, and kind of see a golden handcuffs type of situation starting to emerge. So I left that job after about 10 months. I was also aware at that point that mentorship was going to be a big part of getting better. And at that job, it was just me and one other developer. And so I decided to leave, and it's been a really good move for me. It's led to a lot of other stuff that has happened. And so I would just say be open to changing jobs if you feel like you can get a better fit. Since the first job is the hardest to get in any field, the next one is easier, and then the next one's easier, and so on. Additionally, when you're changing jobs, that's usually for most people the time when you get the biggest bump in salary. So if you're willing to change jobs, I'm not saying change every year, but if you're willing to kind of look, a lot of times that can have technical benefit, but usually a salary benefit as well. So if you are stuck in a rut or you want to learn something new, don't be afraid to change jobs. My fourth piece of advice is avoid making mountains out of molehills / it's all patterns. So I was talking earlier about this Redux project I'd worked on, and how I always kind of thought Redux was this big, scary, intimidating thing, and then it turned out it was just a library like a lot of others, and turned out to be a collection of patterns. And I found that to be the case with pretty much everything in engineering, is that usually there's a base set of patterns that you need to learn, and then the rest is kind of implementation details. And so for a long time that was Redux, for a long time that was doing backend, a lot of other stuff as well, cloud, infra, stuff like that, where it just kind of seems like, ooh, that seems big and scary and intimidating, and I can kind of do that to myself. But what I've realized is that most of the time there's just a core set of things to learn. I've learned that the other side of the coin of leaning into discomfort is realizing that everything is just a pattern. And so hopefully I'm willing to do this a little bit more often with a little bit less anxiety, and I hope you do too. And my last piece of advice is build projects that you care about. And so I think a lot of times we kind of get into this type of mentality where we feel like we should be building side projects, but we don't really want to. And so I would say build things, but build things that you care about. I read the book Range last year, which is awesome. It is from David Epstein, and it's about how basically having multiple interests and being broad instead of deep can help you to be really innovative. And I wrote a blog post about one particular part of the book that talked about these two different Nobel Prize winning scientists and the projects that they would run on the weekends when they were off the clock. It weren't things that these two guys had to do, but they were things that they wanted to do and that they were interested in, and led directly to Nobel Prize winning research or just significant moves forward in their career and significant contributions and breakthroughs in their career. And so the takeaway that I drew from that is that when you're building side projects and working on stuff that you're really into and interested and care about, that's where the most innovation happens, that's where the most progress happens. So don't build side projects just because you feel like you have to put them on a portfolio. Build things that you actually care about and want to exist in the world. So that's it. Those are my 5 biggest pieces of advice after the first few years of my career. I would love to hear about your thoughts about those pieces of advice, or what you might suggest in the comments below. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.